protest, outrage. Indeed, they were all the words used over the past week to tell the story of how Tony Robinson was killed and the response that followed his death. But what happened next? The way the police responded to protesters sent a message that, at least in this one respect, Madison is not Ferguson. And it was a message from the police that came from the very top. Absent was the militarized police response to protesters that strained tensions in Ferguson. Instead, there was the police chief praying with Tony Robinson's grandmother and ensuring his officers did not repeat the actions of officers in Ferguson.
Everybody's still engaging with the crowd. We're still facilitating. We're trying to understand, and we do understand, the sense of loss and the resentment and the lack of trust for the police. So we're going to continue to work through this grieving process together. It's not the police and the community. It's us.
Police Chief Michael Koval joins me now from Madison. So, Chief, you talk about there being an us who's grieving. I just spoke with a young woman moments ago from there in Madison who was at the funeral yesterday. Her sense of loss, very tangible, very real. What does it mean to say that the police are grieving with this community?
Well, again, I don't want to feel like we are compartmentalized as if we were not a part of the fabric of the life stream of our community. We go to the same schools, we go to the same malls, our kids are in school together. So to sort of differentiate us as somehow being in two different camps is not really the true realities of what we're doing here in community policing. And so in that sense, we all have that shared sense of loss.
Chief, you made a number of different choices than your colleagues in other cities who have been faced with similar experiences. One of them was to immediately release the name of the officer, Matt Kenney, who was actually the shooter in this case. Now, in other similar circumstances, police leadership have indicated they didn't release the names of the officers because they feared for the officers' safety. Is that not a concern for you in this case?
Well, of course, we're always worried about maintaining the officer's safety, but in this juncture, knowing that that name is going to be released inevitably, I think it goes to a grander sense of your transparency in trying to recultivate and re-engage the trust that may have been lost with many in our community. And of course, we're not going to leave an officer stranded or isolated or marginalized. We had already taken contingencies for his safety, and so from that standpoint, I think it was best that we get out that information in real time so that people know that we're not trying to obfuscate the facts.
You did something else that I thought was fascinating in comparison, again, to what we've seen from some of your law enforcement colleagues in other cities. I just want to play a small bit of Monday's press conference and then ask you about your decision to respond in this way. Let's just take a quick listen.
I just don't know that it's helpful for the police to take a young man's life and reduce it to some sort of a record of arrests and prosecutions. I don't think that has value in terms of where we want to take our community in next steps.
So you chose not to talk about whether or not young Mr. Tony Robinson had some sort of previous arrest. That, again, quite different than choices made previously. Can you talk to me about your decision there?
At a fundamental level, I have two adult sons of my own. We're all in this sense of humanity and grief and loss together. What possible good can there come of something in terms of trying to engage in some sort of character assassination on a poor man whose life was unfulfilled, owing in part to the actions of the police? So in that sense, there's no way that I was going to be bait and switched into trying to demean someone whose family is still starkly grieving. It just is not productive for anybody on any level.
So it seems to me, Chief, that again, your responses, the way that you are engaging with this community feels so dramatically different. And this is the same week that this was occurring in your community. The Department of Justice was announcing 6 different cities across the country where it's going to be engaging in really changing the way that policing is done. I'm not sure if you've seen those reports yet, but I'm wondering, are you actively, purposely doing something different in Madison? Is this just about you and your position, or is this about an entire police force?
I'd really like to believe that I'm just merely the figurehead of a force that is deeply committed to community engagement. We are among the first to have had neighborhood officers, mental health officers, liaisons in oh so many contexts beyond conventional or traditional law enforcement. I think that when you have 455 people, we have bachelor's degrees, we come from all walks of life, we're highly diverse. I just think that we're in a position poised to show the country that there's a different narrative that can be lived if only you commit to it.
So let me ask you a tough one. Given how different it is there, how is it that a young man, a friend could have called asking for help, and the young man who was, as far as we know at this point, unarmed, ended up being shot by one of the officers?
Well, of course it's difficult, because if at the outset of a call, if that's all we know about it, then that, of course, portrays a sort of one-dimensional approach to the grand context of that call. We know that with more time and with the DCI and letting the investigation, there are many layers to this onion, and the first call in and of itself, again, does not define the sort of evolution of all that is known about the case, or hopefully will become revealed by DCI. So we have to suspend the judgment, and we have to await those fact findings.
Thank you to Police Chief Michael Koval in Madison, Wisconsin. Here's to things unfolding very differently in your city than we have seen them across the country. And up next,